This is our first webinar on Hurricane Delta. We've been sending out information by email. There has been a little bit of a shift toward the west in the forecast, especially in some of the models. So we thought we would start these webinars giving that closer approach, the potential for a closer approach. Still does look like Louisiana is the most likely landfall, but Texas may well see impacts from this storm. Here's a look at the latest track. It's just a little bit of a shift to the west from where it was earlier. Forecast to make landfall pretty close to major hurricane status. It is a Category 4 storm right now with maximum sustained winds of 145 miles per hour. So it is said to impact the Yucatan very strongly. Perhaps weaken slightly, but then re-emerging over the Gulf and regaining that major hurricane status of Category 3 or higher. One thing I want to say is that some of our models follow a fairly close left of cone track, bringing it in closer to the Texas-Louisiana border. So don't focus on that thin line in the middle, on those black points. Realize there still is some uncertainty in the track of the storm. But anywhere within that cone, we are looking for some elevated tides and high surf along the upper Texas coast at a minimum, and the possibility of at least tropical storm force winds based on this track. We will have a better handle on the track as we get closer, of course. A left side of cone track or a shift toward the west would bring some of those higher winds and surge into our area. Latest satellite picture, you can see Delta here over the Northwest Caribbean, really rapidly intensifying to a Category 4 hurricane from just a depression about a day ago. So very, very rapid intensification. And it is moving fairly quickly toward the west-northwest now. As we saw on the forecast cone graphic, forecast to sort of bend more toward the north and then the north-northeast as it approaches the Gulf Coast. The details of the timing of that turn and the arc of it will determine how close it gets to the upper Texas coast and what our impacts will be. This map gives you an idea of the timing of the arrival of tropical storm force winds. You can see it also shows the point probabilities of getting tropical storm force winds. So let's focus on the color shading first. You can see those highest values up in the 70 to 90% range are right into coastal Louisiana. But if you look at the zone from Galveston Bay up to the Texas-Louisiana border, we actually have, with this advisory, 40 to even 70%. So those are very high probabilities as well, and tropical storm force winds are a pretty good bet, even on the left-hand side of the track. Here's a look at the probability of sustained 58 mile per hour winds, and you can again see the axis of maximum probabilities into Louisiana, but some fairly high probabilities even from Galveston Bay on east, especially 30 to really 20 to 40% in that zone. And then just keep in mind this pattern you see here would shift if the track were to shift. So if the track were to shift toward the west, you would see those higher probabilities push further into our forecast area. The hurricane force wind probabilities, it again looks to be higher as you go over to Louisiana. Not as high in our forecast area, but again, that pattern could shift if we do get a track shift. Rainfall, as we remember with Laura, for example, the rainfall is going to depend on the track, very sensitive to that. You can see the current 7-day rainfall forecast there of about 5 to 10 inches in a swath sort of near and to the right of the track. So like we saw with Laura on the west side, as you get far enough to the west of the track, you may not get any rain. but as you get closer, you could get a lot of rain. So again, this is going to be heavily track dependent, and right now it looks like the heavier rainfall would be to our east. Thinking about now the wave heights and the marine conditions, this chart, these 10 panels kind of show the progression of the high waves associated with Delta as we go through the next several days. So you can see that maximum there near the storm Wednesday morning near the Yucatan Channel there, and then just progressing across the bay so that by the time we get to Thursday evening, we're getting some of that wave energy hitting the Texas coastline. And so you'll probably see some swell from Delta as early as Thursday during the day, and then some pretty heavy surf as we go into the night Thursday and Friday. As far as tide levels, it's sort of the same timing. What we see here on this chart here in red, this is the observed high and low tides. So just bumping up between about 2 feet and a little over down to about 1.5. Normal high and low tide cycle. If you go look forward then, forward of this vertical red line, you see the forecast, and the gray area gives you kind of an uncertainty, a little bit of a range there. So bottom line, we're looking at some of those high tides from the storm starting really Thursday night and continuing Friday. So that's kind of our timeline for that. This is bay entrance, so it gives you an idea of the Gulf facing beaches, and the bay similarly Thursday night and Friday look to be when we'll have those issues with elevated tides. What kind of values is this model showing? It's on average a little bit over 4, but you can see there's some spread there up to maybe as high as 5 feet above mean lower low water. And this is very track dependent. So this is just kind of the best forecast right now. But remember, any kind of shifts in the track can make these values even a bit higher. The other thing that the Hurricane Center wanted to point out is it looked like this storm would have a fairly large wind field. And storms with large wind fields can produce some pretty hefty surf and surge. So, you know, as long as we're on the left-hand side of the track, it won't be as bad as it could be. But even so, like we saw with Laura, we will get some high tides and some minor coastal flooding at a minimum. The other thing to point out on charts like this, the mean water level a little bit above 4, but the wave action kind of adds effectively to that. The high surf kind of pushes water up further than that number alone would indicate. So key takeaways here, we're looking at some elevated tides along the Gulf and the bays, and some high surf and beach erosion at the beaches. Really, no matter what track it follows, we're going to see those kind of impacts. The tropical storm force winds, we think, are also probably a good bet, probably likely, especially as you go from Galveston up the coast, you know, maybe even a bit further down. This is all going to depend on the track. You know, how does it make that turn? How close does it get up to the Texas coast? But even on the left side of the track, a storm this size will likely bring some tropical storm force winds to parts of our area. We would expect to see some watches issued as early as tomorrow, so look for that. Perhaps a tropical storm watch. We'll see how it plays out with the track forecast tonight. And again, those high seas and swells offshore are going to be a big factor as well. They get into our coastal waters on Thursday and continue Friday as well. As far as confidence, we have relatively high confidence that we will see some surge and high surf impacts and elevated tides. Lower confidence on the exact track and the track-dependent impacts. So I'm talking about how high will the surge be, how high will the winds be, and will we get rainfall? If it does track more to our east, you know, we will see impacts kind of like we're advertising in this forecast. If it were to turn a little bit more gradually and come closer to the Texas coast, then we would have to ratchet up our winds and surge and even rainfall forecast a little bit. So that's kind of where we stand now. We will be looking at another advisory coming out tonight, and there will be some emailed information sent on that. We will do a webinar again at 10:30 tomorrow. By that time, as I said, we may have some watches in effect for parts of our coastline, so we'll want to update you then. At this point, only planning on one webinar tomorrow at 10:30. Unless the situation changes drastically during the day, we'll stick to that plan, but that's our tentative plan for now.